There's a lot of reasons that teams can fail.
Like lack of motivation,
Disagreements about how to get things done,
frustrations with upper management.
or insufficient planning.
The list can go on and on.
And for leaders, it can be hard to decide what to fix first,
Our knee-jerk reaction tends to be pointing fingers.
or ignoring the problem altogether.
This book says that neither is the right solution.
Instead of passing the blame or looking to others for answers,
Look inward, start with yourself.
it's time for Extreme Ownership, how U.S. Navy SEALs lead and win. Welcome back. You're listening to Motivation Minute, where we unravel the timeless truths in that stack of books you've been wanting to read so that you don't have to. And this week's book is Extreme Ownership, How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. The point of this book is obviously extreme ownership, which is taking full responsibility for yourself and not blaming any of your subordinates, as this book puts it.
Right. It takes responsibility to a whole new level.
Yeah, because usually we want to push the responsibility off ourselves because it impacts our ego if we go south. But the fact is that part of being a leader is losing as well as winning and taking the hit when you do lose.
Exactly. Basically, the only way to succeed is taking responsibility for every single thing that happens to you is kind of the point this book talks about. And we've talked about this before, but this is like, it's the title of the book, Extreme Ownership. Like taking extreme responsibility of everything in your life. And just before we start, I just saw a video recently of Will Smith where he talks about the difference between fault and responsibility, how, yeah, some things may not be your fault, but it's your responsibility to fix it. So that's a different thing. It's your responsibility for everything in your life, regardless of whether or not it was your fault. Like you have to fix everything, and that's yourself, and that's what this book is about.
And part of the reason you have to fix everything is because you're leaning into a mission in your life or your work or your business. And a mission, the book was saying, it's a plan with a defined end state. It's like a goal you're getting to. You have to be 100% aligned with the mission because you're going to take full responsibility for the mission, good or bad.
Yeah, if you don't take responsibility, it's not going to happen.
Right. And if you don't align yourself with the mission, nobody's going to follow you.
Exactly. He talks about how teams are only as good as the leader. Basically, if you're doing something, you need others. Anything. If you're going to accomplish any mission in life, you're going to need other people helping you. There's no way out of that. And then if the team does a bad job, it's completely your fault. Your fault, honestly, and your responsibility. And so it's like, yeah, it's not an option. It's not like, oh, you can have ownership or not. No, it's like if you want to be successful, you have to. Yeah, exactly. There's no way around it other than taking. The more responsibility you take in your life, basically the more things you can then fix in your life and actually do. Because if you blame it on someone else, you're giving up control, so you no longer have the power to make a change or become better because you're giving the responsibility to somebody else or something else. And yeah, this has been a book I wanted to talk about for a while.
Yeah, what's really interesting about the whole concept of the taking responsibility is when things go wrong. And the authors were Navy SEALs, and they brought up an example from an attack they launched where they ended up attacking some of their own forces without realizing it, and several were injured in that skirmish. The person who ultimately took responsibility was Jocko Willink, who is the lead author of the book, and he did that after blaming everyone else in his head and then realizing, wait, it's not their fault. It's mine because I'm the leader. And that's hard to do because you didn't necessarily do something wrong. But the thing you did do wrong was not explain the mission well enough that everybody knew the why. Why are we doing this? And then the what. The simple answer for what we're doing and how that's going to accomplish the why.
Yeah, like it might have been another team member, another one of his guys that started it or took the initial wrong move and attacked the team. It's like you can always make reasons why, this other person did this. Literally, they made this, they caused this problem, But if you just go all the way down, deep back to where it started, it can ultimately be your mistake. It says leaders don't blame the team for mistakes. Subpar performance is your fault for accepting it. And it was ultimately, you can trace it back to, like you said, you didn't communicate the plan. You didn't hire, you're the one that put the guy on your team to begin with. So ultimately, yeah.
And part of communicating that plan is the way you do that. And that's tough because there's a lot of noise around. Because the example from this book is the battlefield. There are so many competing priorities at that point. And so this book says the formula to make the best plan is to prioritize and execute. Breaking that down, that means that you shouldn't multitask with what you're prioritizing. You pick one priority and you make that the biggest priority that's needed right now. You execute on it and then you repeat. In the process of doing that, you'll figure out that priority caused other things, which will make a new bigger priority later on. And as you get ahead, you realize that piece by piece, you start dismantling the larger problem by taking it from different angles.
Right.
What's the first priority right now?
I'm still, trying to figure out, I don't even totally understand this yet, but I've heard from people or from some successful people in this book that you need to, there's one thing, what's the most important thing you need to be doing? Like in the book, The One Thing. And if you just did that, because there's so many things you could do and so many things on my list that I need to accomplish.
Right.
But what's the one thing? And it's so hard for me to give up all the other things to just focus on that one thing. But what they say is, and I'm just trusting them, is that if you do that, that kind of takes care of all the other things in your life. It's like if people have all these health problems, and myself included sometimes, it's like there's all these things that are not going right. But if I just did diet and exercise, or just did those two things, that would solve all the other issues that I'm having. So you can break a lot of down things into just what's the one thing you could do that would basically take care of all the little things.
And it depends on the person too, because in my situation where I'm working, I don't necessarily know what the one thing is that, because the book talks about the one thing, and it makes a lot more sense in the context of your own business, because you're growing your business and you know what the one thing is to grow your business. But when you're working for someone else, you don't always know what the one thing is that will make you better for that person, especially when you don't talk to them very often, which is what happens for me on a, 15 or 17 person team. I don't get to talk to my boss very much. Maybe once every 2 weeks.
Right. And since he's in that situation, he is the leader of the team, so it is ultimately his responsibility. And so that comes down to what the book said is about decentralizing command, about how you want to, and you do that by clearly communicating the task. So talking about how just how that relates to focusing on the one thing and getting it done. A lot of times business owners they won't communicate properly, so they won't let their employees know what is the main thing to do. And then what happens is they focus on other things that are not the most important thing, and then that causes chaos. Then you get upset and you get angry, and then you try to micromanage all the little things that they're doing wrong, instead of, if you would have just from the beginning communicated clearly the main mission.
Yeah.
So it's very, your job as a leader is to clearly communicate with your team exactly what they need to do, or what the mission is, so that then you can then decentralize yourself, the command, that you don't have to micromanage everything. So it's they know what to do clearly, then they can be responsible for it.
Yeah, the book said you're the facilitator and your goal is to work yourself out of your job. Because if you can empower the leaders in your team, then that makes it so that the front lines are able to make decisions and only the critical stuff comes up the chain. And that's a really efficient way to run things. And then you can work your way up to higher leadership by getting yourself out of the current role you're in by just being that good.
Yeah, I'm realizing from this book that, that the whole, the concept of removing yourself from your business or from your tasks, working on your business, not in it, is actually that's not just in business. There's a broader principle there of in anything, not just business, because this book wasn't even necessarily just talking about business, but like in the Army and the Navy SEALs, like that's their goal too. The same goal was to decentralize their command so the other people can take responsibility, or anything that you're accomplishing, you want to do that. And then, business books have just taken that and applied it to business, but like it works for everything. Like if you can communicate to other people, then like that's like one of the most important skills you can have, because it lets them know what to do.
And what that boils down to is the process you're using, because we talked about in the E-Myth how it comes down to the systems you have in place. And if you have the right systems, then you make yourself unimportant because the systems work themselves to keep the business rolling.
Right. And it also talked about how your goal is to simplify it. It's not going to be easy, but you have to communicate it simply. Because I remember just one example I'm thinking of is when I was younger in our family business, I remember I was given jobs to do, and sometimes my grandpa or my dad or whatever, they weren't the best at being precise, like details, like do this and this and this. They would just kind of like blabber out the basic plan, like, oh, I want you to go do, and they didn't tell me how to do it. So it was very vague in my mind. And then I
what you came up with wasn't what they envisioned.
Yeah, exactly. Then they would get upset, and ultimately it was their responsibility. Well, in this case, they were in charge, so it was their responsibility to communicate clearly with me. Now, if you take this for yourself, it's always your responsibility. Let's say in the job situation, like you were saying, well, ultimately it's your fault because you chose the job, right? You could always go back and say, it's my fault ultimately if something's not going right.
Right. It gives you something to throw the blame on and to fix, because you can always fix yourself. You can't fix the people around you necessarily.
Yeah.
Also, it's interesting to think about this communication theme of like making the people below you empowered by flipping it around and making the people above you empowered as well. Because the book talked about leading up the chain, and it said blame yourself if your boss doesn't get it when you're trying to explain something to him. Like, figure out how you can better convey the critical information and decisions. And I just had this happen this week. So for the last 3 weeks, I've been trying to get my boss to open up a charge number so that I can start working on this 20-hour task that's going to fix a process we have internally. And it's going to make it a whole lot smoother. But I realized after explaining it to him that he doesn't really get what I'm doing, because he's managing 20 people, doesn't understand the nitty gritty, and he likes the concept that I'm improving something, but he doesn't have a clue what I'm improving in a sense. And so then he doesn't know what I need, which I realized it came down to how I was communicating, that I wasn't clear enough of exactly what I needed.
Wow.
And today I go into the office and I say, hey, I just need to know how can I get this kind of charge number with this code so I can revise this part so that we can make this part that we're using for software a whole lot more efficient. He's like, oh, go talk to so-and-so. I'm like, that's all I needed, that person. And I realized my giant email I'd written before could be boiled down to that and not bog him down.
Very interesting. That's really impressive, because you're taking the responsibility. You're, in a sense, being the owner, quote, in that situation, and taking ownership of the problem. It'd be so easy, and that's what most employees do is, and it's a valid point. Oh, my boss didn't tell me what to do, so I'm not going to do it. It's his fault, just tell me what to do and I'll do it, And that's the problem, that's, as an employee, you can very easily give up all ownership, and that's what an employee is, in a sense. You don't have that ownership, but it makes you helpless, because but like what you did, you can actually, let's say you have a bigger vision. Maybe you see something your boss doesn't, and you try to tell him, but he doesn't get it. Well, then it's your responsibility to break it down more clearly and clearly communicate that to your boss, and be the owner, and take ownership of that so that it'll happen. And that's amazing that you were able to do that.
And to just drill down to exactly what the issue is, you realize, okay, it's how I communicated it.
Interesting.
So it's a matter of who you talk to and when, and blaming yourself sometimes when the people above you don't get it, and improving in that way, because it's not going to be magical where they suddenly start understanding you just because you're communicating down the chain. You got to do it both directions.
Very interesting. Wow. Yeah, so you can be a leader in any even if you're not in the top of the food chain in your job or your career, like you can take ownership, and that's what is going to move you up the food chain, right?
Right.
Is by the more ownership you take, people will notice, or whether you're working for someone else or yourself. I think right before the call, I was telling you about how I just got scammed recently by this company that sells posters for small businesses, and I just found this out yesterday, and it really pissed me off, and I'm still kind of upset about it. But they basically, about a year and a half ago, this company contacted me and said, "Oh, there's these posters you need for your business, legally," and it was true. I looked it up. I looked at their website. Everything was true, and they called me multiple times and said, these are mandatory posters, which they kind of are.
Oh,
and
this
so I
is
bought
so
them.
deceptive.
I bought them, and then later they called me again. Oh, there's this new business manual, standard operating procedures, whatever that you need. Post them in your business. And I kept buying this, and I've spent over $1,000 over the last year and a half.
Wow.
And I just found out yesterday that it was a scam because I can get all that stuff for free, literally downstairs from my office at my
downstairs from your office?
Because I'm right next to the job service in our town, and they provide free posters, and you can download them for free from online. And that's all you need to post in your business. It's just like like minimum wage and legal things. And I got scammed over $1,000. But and we were gonna send back like a nasty letter with to the company and get all mad and we printed out their horrible. They have horrible reviews, and they are a scam company. I mean, they're doing everything legal. But their
website looks good from what you told me. Like it looked believable when you looked it up.
Yeah, I'm gonna name them. They're called Personal Concepts Limited. There's probably lots of companies like this, but they just take advantage of small business owners and sell them stuff they don't need and say it's mandatory when it is, but you can get it for free. So I was really angry, but then we decided not to send. We didn't want to stoop to their level. We're not going to send a nasty letter. We're not going to. And ultimately it's my fault because I believed them. I didn't do enough research. I wouldn't. It was my responsibility for getting scammed. It was.
That's okay. So there's that thing, faults versus responsibility. I'm thinking. So it's kind of your fault, but not really. It's more your responsibility what happened because you thought you were doing the right research about the company to make sure they were legit. And then you find out.
I didn't nearly do enough. I should have done
so
more.
You learn now you didn't do enough, and then you learn now you got scammed. But that's part of the responsibility piece because you learn from the thing and you move on with that in mind for the future, which will improve your future decisions versus just like faults would be like blame. So it's the right attitude to have where it's like, it's my responsibility because it's on me. And it's, even though it was, it's going to hurt. It hurts me because it's $1,000 scam.
Yeah.
But
it did hurt.
Yeah. So the thing is, it's the responsibility piece, and that's important because you can use that in the future. It's not all a blame game.
Exactly. I learned from it and to not be as trusting of people who are, even though it seemed very, very legit at the time, and it was true what they were saying, and I could make very good reasons for why it was not my fault and why, I don't have to take any responsibility for that because it wasn't my fault. But ultimately, they called me on my phone. I owned that phone. They called, I looked them up on, it was all me. My brain believed them. It was my phone.
Yeah. And that's an advanced case because you usually find scammer websites that actually can't spell. And this one, was believable.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, exactly.
All the normal, like, hey, this is a scam, things that shout at you weren't there. So it's like, wow, it can get advanced.
Yeah, but it shows the inconsistency of our, like, we'll blame, when bad things happen to us, we'll always blame something else. And then when some good things happen, we'll be, or like if people win the lottery, or it's more easy to think, oh, that was me, or I bought the lottery ticket, it's my, but in reality, it's totally luck and it wasn't even, but like, for if good things happen, we'll be okay with taking responsibility for it. But if bad things happen, we don't. Even though they were both not even, our doing. So it's like so many things happen to us that aren't directly our fault, but ultimately are our responsibility, and you can learn from them to not do it the same next time. Because, see, that's the thing. You don't learn from it if you just blame them and just say, oh, it was their fault, I can't believe they did that to me.
Yep.
Then I wouldn't be as aware next time because I'd be putting the responsibility on them rather than owning it myself. That way I can learn from it.
You learn fast because responsibility can hurt a lot more than blame does. So it's like a steeper learning curve.
Yeah.
But the one thing I can tell you is that this book is not a scam because it's extremely well written with some awesome examples, which we never even really touched on the military examples that were in this book. It was fun.
Yeah.
It kind of brought military stories and then put a business parallel with it that we got these principles from. But really good. And if you want to learn more about taking responsibility and what that means and what you can gain from that, pick up this book. It's awesome. Extreme Ownership. And my number one takeaway is keep your mission simple, believe in it, and communicate. If you do those three things, you will be able to take extreme ownership and do so very well. Because if you keep it simple, people will understand you. If you believe in it, people will follow you. And if you communicate, it's well-oiled gears up and down the chain.
Right. It's all on you, and it's possible, It's cool because it gives you the step-by-step directions for accomplishing anything you want.
Right.
And that's going to be by taking ownership, communicating clearly to your team, simplifying the plan, taking responsibility for it, whatever happens,
So, excellent read. And if you want to hear a book like this every week, all you have to do is tap subscribe, and you'll be able to, because there's an episode that pops onto your device every week from us here at Motivation Minute. Thanks for listening. We love it when you write into our survey and tell us about the books you want to hear. So you can do that at motivationminute.com and tap survey. And we'll see you next week.